Today, we're diving into Neo Berlin 2087, a cyberpunk game made in Germany. Elysium Game Studio, the team behind Neo Berlin 2087, first introduced the project back in 2021, initially under the working title Shadow of Conspiracy, Section 2. But since 2022, the official title has been Neo Berlin 2087, and it looks like it's here to stay. This is why you might hear some people say the game was only announced in 2022, but that's not correct. The game is set to be a cyberpunk action roleplay game, set in the titular city of Berlin, Germany. The dystopian city has built massive walls around itself to protect against the dangers of the surrounding wasteland. This wasteland is home to uncontrollable machines that have developed a life of their own due to malfunctions. It seems these machines were dumped there at some point, but they're not the only ones. Outcast humans have also been banished to the wasteland, and now discarded hardware and BioWare roam the barren land, likely harboring resentment toward the city's inhabitants. The wasteland itself barely sustains any active ecosystem. There's little water, so the bio-outcasts survive in small settlements and caves, often forming factions that don't always see eye to eye. Inside Berlin, two main social classes dominate, the low life and the high life, classic cyberpunk themes. Add to that the technological advancements, including the availability of cyberware, but mostly only for those who can afford the expensive tech. The elite live in luxurious buildings, indulging in pure opulence, while the poorest struggle to make it through each day in the slums. The chaos begins when the city's police chief is murdered, setting off a journey that the studio describes as a tale of justice, friendship, love, guilt, sacrifice, and betrayal. We step into the shoes of Detective Nolan, a brilliant investigator with a troubled past, tasked with finding and protecting the police chief's daughter, who may hold the key to solving her father's murder. Along the way, we'll face moral dilemmas that force us to make tough decisions. As for the gameplay, here's what we know so far. It seems that the city sections of the game will be more linear, while the wasteland will likely feature larger areas that we can visit and perhaps explore to scavenge for resources. The description hints at this. Abandoned settlements might still be a good source of food, while ammo and cyber parts can be found throughout the wasteland and used for upgrades. Machine enemies have better chances of dropping cyber parts but are tougher to defeat, especially since they're more abundant at night, while human enemies are more common during the day. So it seems worth exploring abandoned settlements to find useful items. Food will likely act as a healing or buff item, and we'll be able to find cyber parts for upgrades. There will probably be some sort of augmentation and skill system that lets us tailor Nolan's approach to our playstyle. According to the developers, there will be a wide range of stealth, shooter, and RPG mechanics. You'll have the choice to approach situations either stealthily or with brute force. Whether you can stick exclusively to stealth or combat throughout the entire game isn't clear yet. Besides combat and stealth, you'll also conduct investigations, where you'll examine crime scenes. Something that reminds me of Detroit, Become Human. You'll inspect specific areas of a crime scene to gather clues. We'll also have the ability to fly through Berlin in our flying car, which we can apparently pilot freely. We'll likely have to stay within a designated airspace, but still, being able to fly at all is a cool feature. The game will be playable in both first-person and third-person perspectives. It seems like we'll have the option to choose our preferred view in some sections, while others may be locked to a specific perspective. That's about all we know regarding the planned gameplay mechanics so far. Since 2021, the studio has consistently shown off glimpses of the game every August, just in time for Gamescom, and this year is no different. So let's take a look at the latest footage, and then we'll dive deeper into Neo Berlin 2087. If you've already seen the newest trailer, the video has timestamps, so feel free to skip ahead. Let's head to Berlin.
I know you wanted me to use this channel only in emergencies, but I can hear them again. They're coming closer.
She's here. She's somewhere in this sector.
But I had to discover what lay beyond. I had to see it with my own eyes. Who are you?
I'm here to help you. My name is Nolan. I'm a special investigator. I work with your father.
Help me.
We gotta go. Now.
I never asked for your help. Why are you risking everything for me?
I'm not gonna let them hurt you, Natalie. This city needs someone like you.
I never asked for any of this.
We'll find a way.
I hope you're right.
I am doing whatever is necessary to keep you safe.
If you're feeling like you've just watched an Unreal Engine 5 tech demo rather than a real game, you're not alone. This was the case with previous trailers as well, though it's clear that the devs have made an effort to address some of the biggest criticisms. At first glance, the footage looks mind-blowingly good, but when you take a more critical look, you start to notice significant limitations, which gives the whole thing a strange vibe. It feels simultaneously super high-end and super cheap. The reason? Elysium Game Studio isn't a large studio, but they have big ambitions. Founder and CEO Ivan Mirkovic has only worked as a game director on one title before, Past Cure, a 2018 game that received middling to poor reviews. Additionally, not much is known about the studio, which was founded in 2019 specifically for this project. They started with a small team of fewer than 10 people, but now it seems they have just over 10 working on the game. Not much is known about their other funding sources. There have been some grants from the government, but the studio is far from playing in the AAA League financially. There still doesn't seem to be a publisher involved, so the studio is essentially self-financing through an unknown amount of capital and government grants. This brings us to why the trailers look the way they do. They need attention and a showcase. They need to capture the interest of players, but they also need something to show potential investors or publishers. This is why the footage looks more like a vertical slice than a finished game. But this approach seems to have worked because the studio appeared in Epic's Mega Grants recap for 2023. They received a sum between $5,000 and $500,000, almost certainly due to the trailers they've produced, which explains why the footage often looks like an Unreal Engine 5 tech demo. Incidentally, Critical Hit Games took a similar path with their noir cyberpunk debut title, Nobody Wants to Die. The Polish team initially received at least one government grant and was later awarded the maximum amount from Epic's Mega Grants program. The two studios are similar in their approach and game themes, but that's where the similarities end. Critical Hit Games focused on a single core feature, crime scene reconstruction, an interesting story, and visual presentation. Nobody Wants to Die is a first-person-only game with no combat, no stealth, no inventory, no skill system, no augmentations, no flying vehicles, no large areas, and only 6 hours of gameplay. It took the studio, which was likely similar in size, 4 years to create, with significantly lower costs in Poland. Plus, they had a publisher. In contrast, Elysium Games wants to achieve much more with far fewer resources and higher costs. This naturally raises the question, why hasn't a publisher picked them up after all these years? Many believe the issue is that Neo Berlin lacks a unique selling point, a clear identity. Nobody Wants to Die had its own identity thanks to its unusual 1930-inspired look, which worked surprisingly well. Elysium Games, according to their CEO, is banking on Berlin as their unique selling point. The problem is that in a typical Unreal Engine-style cyberpunk city, you can barely recognize Berlin, aside from the TV tower, which looks different but still somewhat explainable. However, the studio seems to have worked on this in 2023 and 2024. In 2023, we got our first glimpse of Sanssouci Palace, Schloss Kummerfrei, as it's called in German, located in Potsdam, which is part of the wasteland in Neo-Berlin. Bandits have set up camp there, and Nolan sneaks and shoots his way through. In the new trailer, we see a cut scene in front of the Brandenburg Gate. While it looks a bit like a stage set, at least it's an iconic Berlin spot. Finally, the intended unique selling point is starting to take shape. It's becoming more exciting, especially for those who might want to revisit places they've seen in real life or plan to visit them later. I think that's always a fantastic idea. For international audiences who might not know much about Germany, seeing something different from the usual US or Asian-inspired cyberpunk settings could be really interesting. So, in terms of a unique selling point, they're at least heading in the right direction. Besides that, the devs have responded to criticisms that Neo-Berlin looked too drab and monochrome. The new trailer shows a lot more color, though I did get some Cyberpunk 2077 vibes here and there, which, as it turns out, I'm not alone in feeling. I don't think there's anything wrong with drawing a bit of inspiration as long as it's not just copying. Many filmmakers and game developers have drawn inspiration from Blade Runner, and that's been fine for everyone. I don't find it particularly problematic that Neo-Berlin has the year 2087 in its title, even though it immediately makes you think of 2077. After all, it's a small studio that needs all the attention it can get. But just to clarify, the development of Germany and Berlin in the Cyberpunk 2077 universe and in the world of Neo-Berlin have nothing to do with each other and don't share many similarities. So, if a similar asset happens to show up, it doesn't have much impact. In recent years, Elysium Games has been busy putting their own stamp on the project. However, it seems they've had to focus primarily on appealing to investors with their presentations, which likely explains the style of the trailers. The trailer even mentions at the end that not all of the footage will appear in the final game. Many placeholder assets are currently in use. The question now is, what's next for Neo-Berlin? The developers aim to build a brand with a unique identity, which means they'll need to create their own assets. Elysium can't just buy everything from the Unreal Asset Shop, because that would dilute their identity among countless other hobby projects using the same assets. The devs also want the game to include complex systems and deliver a strong story. Amazing graphics are great, but if the animations are poor, it can ruin the entire experience. All of this takes a lot of time and, therefore, a lot of money. A studio of 12 people can easily cost €500,000 or more a year, depending on who is employed and where. From what I've seen, Elysium Games employs some people abroad, which can either lower or raise costs, depending on where they're located. It's a simple equation. The money in the bank, from both private and grant sources, minus the yearly costs, equals the number of years you have to finish the game. Ideally, the studio would find a publisher. Since the trailers regularly appear on Sony's PlayStation channel, it's possible that Sony has at least some interest, which could lead to them becoming the publisher. But that would likely mean exclusivity, so no PC version at first. Another possibility would be bringing Epic on board, which would also mean the game would be an Epic exclusive. Whether the material shown in the latest trailer is enough to attract a publisher, whether it's Sony or someone else, depends on what else they can showcase and what the cost would be for a publisher. But it's clear that the quality of the sequences has improved, which makes the project more interesting. If no publisher steps up, they could try crowdfunding. However, that's not an easy path, especially since the trailer's unusual nature has made players skeptical. Whether that would work is a big question. If all else fails, they could rely on grant funding, but whether there's enough grant money available and how much they could secure is uncertain. If nothing works out, Elysium Games might have to start cutting features. That's what happened with Vigilance 2099. Initially, they had big plans for an entire cyberpunk city with flying vehicles, a bounty hunter system, and much more. But last year, they scaled it down significantly to just a mega building that players would explore. The same could happen with Neo Berlin. Features might be cut, and ambitions lowered to get the game out and start making money. That wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, as long as it's communicated clearly and the final product is still fun. Of course, there's also the risk that keeping the studio afloat becomes the primary goal, rather than the project itself. That could end badly, but I'm optimistic and don't think it will come to that. The game has real potential, but it doesn't look like something that should release in 2024. I'm definitely curious to see what happens with Neo Berlin 2087. Maybe the studio will secure a publisher with this new material. We can only hope, because there aren't nearly enough good cyberpunk games out there. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.